Good morning, Mr. President, members of council. Today I'm going to go over the American Rescue Plan Act. This is a lengthy presentation, that's why I asked to come down here. I do have my support team in here. This is a big deal. It's $45.5 million. It is going to take a team to manage these funds, so they are here to help me get through this. So the background, in March of 2021, Congress passed the ARPA into law, and it gave us $45.5 million. We did get our first tranche of money, $22.7 million, May 17, 2021, and then we should get the second half again this coming May. Everything will have to be spent or encumbered, is the word used, by December 31st, 2024. Okay, there are 5 eligible uses. They are to replace public sector revenue loss, support public health response to COVID-19, address the negative economic impacts of COVID-19, offer premium pay for essential workers, and invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. They are very restrictive. We're going to go into what much of this means, and then later go into the recommendation. Okay, the first one where it said replace lost revenue. So each government can do a calculation, determine how much they lost during the COVID timeframe, or you can just take off $10 million. The calculation is complicated, so they're saying, okay, just like we did, we got $45 million. You can take $10 million off the top, and you can replace it with your revenue. As long as you don't put it in your rainy day fund, use it for debt service, put it in your pension, or anything that would conflict with ARPA statutes. So the next category was public health response to COVID-19. This would be if you want to set up a vaccination program, testing program. We want services that promote isolation, quarantine, COVID-19 prevention and treatment type of responses, is what this slide says. Okay, the next category, a little more lengthy, is to address the negative economic impacts. And those then have subcategories in there. So you can have a negative economic impact on households, small businesses, nonprofits, different industries, and also talking about governments in general to restore the public safety capacity. Within each of those categories, there's definitions of what qualifies that a household has been impacted or small business has been impacted. So this first slide here shows that what households have been impacted negatively due to COVID. So the first part is you're impacted if your income is at or below 65% of the area median income, otherwise known as AMI. You'll hear me say that multiple times through this presentation. You can also use 300% of the federal poverty level, which is $65,880 if you have a family of 3. So they just automatically presume you would be eligible. Or you can use our 65% here in Sussex County. And just to give you a perspective of what that is, in Sussex County for a family of 3, the 65% is $43,983. So it is lower when you use that threshold. Then there's also a category in the final rule where it's disproportionately impacted households. So these are even lower income. So this is income at or below 40%, or you can presume a household of 3 using the 185% of the federal poverty level, which would be $40,626. We're going to stick with, what you'll see is I'm going to stick with the impacted household, the 65% of AMI, with my recommendations. All right, so once you've determined if you are an impacted group, so here, impacted households, you can now use those funds for certain things on those households. So it's food assistance for food banks, emergency housing assistance, health insurance coverage. You can see everything here on the list. Now you have the other category where it's disproportionately impacted households. You can use the funds for additional resources for those types of houses. So remediation of lead paint, investment in medical facilities and equipment. Again, these have to serve those types of, the category of households. There's disproportionate impacted households on that list. All right, moving on to the other categories in here, you can be impacted small business. What defines that is you have to have no more than 500 employees, independently owned. You had to show a decrease in revenue or gross receipts, had an increase in costs, or had challenges covering payroll, any kind of operating costs.
Can I jump in quick?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
These seem very, very high level.
Yes.
I mean, are there regs below this, I'm assuming, because these just seem vague to me.
Yes, obviously, this is over a 400-page final rule document that I'm trying to summarize in high-level slides for you.
Yeah.
So
the devil's in the details. I mean,
you're correct.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. There is a lot of details in that document. But this, yes, very high level. In fact, if you pick certain categories, you're going to have different kinds of reporting requirements on top of this as well, depending on what category. And for this conversation, I'm trying to keep it very high level.
I understand.
And then you could use those for small businesses. You could do loans, grants, technical assistance, and counseling. Again, like I said, you can also be an impacted nonprofit. You can be an impacted industry. Those qualifications are there. And then the eligible uses are just like the previous slide, where it was like we could do loans, grants to mitigate the financial hardship that these nonprofits or industries have witnessed during COVID. Okay. The next part is you can restore public sector capacity. So this final rule says that governments have been impacted, so you're able to take some of these funds and boost your capacity. And what that means is you can use this for payroll to cover benefits for public safety employees. We have the ability to rehire public sector staff to pre-pandemic levels or above pre-pandemic levels, so above and beyond. Just to give you a feel of what that means, they're using a 7.5% growth. We tend not to grow our government, our employee base at that level that quick. So if I took what we actually have in the budget versus what they said we could do, we could add 30 additional employees using these ARPA funds. Again, this is what the rule says. That's not necessarily what I'm recommending. We could provide worker retention incentives. Again, it's all in the details there. We can't just give all employees an incentive to stay. You actually have to show where they've applied somewhere else, and there's a lot more to this. We could invest in additional technology infrastructure to adapt government operations to the pandemic, so like video conference software. Again, it's all in the details. All this purchases had to happen after 2021. We did this all before 2021 because we needed to react quickly. So most of our expenses would not qualify for that, but wanted to lay everything out there for you. And again, another high level, capital expenditures. They kind of want to discourage using money for capital expenditures. They really want to see this money going to individuals, despite the infrastructure part of the bill. This is where it impacts, COVID impacted those households or nonprofits. So they say capital projects must be related to public health or negative economic impacts and be proportional to the pandemic impact identified. So there's an analysis that needs to be done whether it really makes sense to use capital expenditures if that were something we would want to do. So you can see some of the things that we'd have to do. We would have to get a written justification through the Treasury. So there's this extra layer for capital expenditures. Another thing that we can use the money for is premium pay for essential workers. Essential workers said they were faced heightened risks in COVID-19 due to the character of their work. That means they worked in person throughout the pandemic. They had dealt with things that they couldn't be performed at their home. Treasury, again, There are some stipulations. They really want this money to go to low, moderate income employees. You can go outside that, but they're asking for justification. And premium pay could be up to $13 an hour.
So for an example, if my memory's right, we did give some additional compensation to our paramedics. Is that correct?
That was during the CARES Act that we did get reimbursed
We
for.
already did get.
Yes.
But if we hadn't been reimbursed.
Correct.
That could be.
Correct.
We've already been. Okay.
Already been reimbursed. All right, water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. This is the infrastructure piece. And again, this is very specific. Water, sewer, broadband infrastructure, and no other instruction, no roads, no bridges, anything like that. It wants these three here. So basically, if it qualifies under the EPA's Clean Water State Revolving Fund or Drinking Water Revolving Fund, it would qualify here. We do this almost every day in engineering and Hans's group. So we're very familiar with what would qualify for the water and sewer. And again, you can also use it for broadband. There is some criteria. It has to be at least 100 megabits per second download to qualify for these funds.
But, Gina?
Yes.
The broadband thing, Councilman Schaefer talked about that this morning.
Yes.
Is there's an additional initiative by the state on that, correct? Am I correct on that?
That is correct. The state has put money aside for broadband throughout the state.
Do you know how much money that is?
It's
117 million, I think.
100 million.
A lot of money. I forget the exact
I
number.
think it's 117 million.
Yeah, I usually quote 100
Okay,
million.
but we can piggyback on that?
There is
Do we
no
need to?
need to, what we
There's no need
hear,
to,
there's
right?
no need to.
Not well, they're
They're got
spending.
it. What we're hearing, we're working
That's-
very
okay.
closely with DTI and saying, we have some money, would you like,
So you're already-
we're good.
okay.
And why duplicate efforts when your money can be spent somewhere else?
Okay, that's kind of my question.
I hate
Okay.
to say this, but do you think $117 million is enough to bring broadband throughout the entire state?
They're the ones that got a huge study done that says what they need through their DTI group.
They think that'll get it?
That, yes.
I hope so. I really do.
But it's not the entire state, pretty much. They're really hitting on western Kent County, western Sussex County.
Underserved
and
areas.
The underserved areas,
Underserved
correct.
community, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. So here goes to the recommendations. So I had some goals set up for when I was trying to come up with a recommendation. This is a lot of money. So the goals are make sure that we meet ARPA requirements. All these projects will have to be completed or under contract by December 31st, 2024. So you could have something under contract December 31st, 2024, but not spend the money until 2026. But it needs to be substantially underway, and our contracts have to be approved by 2024. So that's a big deal. Again, I don't want to grow government. As the person that's responsible to present a budget to council, I want to be able to sustain this moving forward and not create a program that we're going to have to raise taxes in order to sustain. So once the funds are gone, they're gone. We can't assume there's going to be more. So most of my recommendations are going to strengthen the programs and services that we already have in place today, just strengthen them.
Is the timeline going to run in just about the same as this reassessment in 2024 completion?
Yes, we have fun times ahead of us. It's going to be,
Talking about raising taxes, I mean,
well, the taxes, I mean, we got the project of the reassessment, but the taxes, again, it's an equalization thing for
That's right,
reassessment.
yeah.
It's not necessarily, what I've heard from the five of you is that you do not want to increase the taxes. It's just,
correct. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So the next one is to align the recommendation with council priorities that I've heard through the budget process, through the comp plan, is affordable housing and providing adequate infrastructure for our residents. And just like we were just talking about with broadband, I didn't want to duplicate anything that I've already heard that was done or will be done. So that has to do with broadband. I know the state does some things with small businesses, and they've done it with the CARES Act. So I'm trying to spread the money out further from what already has been established. So here's the recommendations. Like I said in the previous slide, the first thing is to fund county services that are already in place. Our Biggest thing is sewer infrastructure. We will help with improving our treatment plants, helping with the disposal of the wastewater. So that's $25 million right there. Affordable housing initiative, $6.3 million. I'm going to go into detail of these. This is just the high-level summary sheet. Increase our IT infrastructure for our water and sewer infrastructure. If you ever read on cybersecurity or anything like that, what wants to be attacked is the sewer system. If you can't flush, that's a problem. So we need to right. We don't want to be held hostage. So we want to boost up our infrastructure and our cybersecurity, specifically to water and sewer infrastructure. So additional low-income services. This will be the rehabilitation program that we already have in place. We'll get into detail there. Add additional staff for EOC and EMS, and then bolster training in the local hospitality industry, specifically the kitchen incubator. I have $500,000. I don't have another slide on this because it's pretty brief. If you remember in the budget, we've been getting money from the state the last 2 years to operate a kitchen incubator, but we haven't had the infrastructure of the kitchen incubator. So we're able to, as an industry that has been hurt, the hospitality industry, we can use that to do that, and then we use the state's funds to operate it. Then the next one is large grants to other nonprofit entities, such as hospitals would be eligible. So there will be a new grant program where other people can apply that do things different than we do. And intergovernmental grants, so if there's some type of initiative throughout the state that we can help the other 2 counties do, or some type of state initiatives, we could partner with that. And we do have a request later in the presentation on this. I did put a little bullet down there that these estimates, they do not add up to be $45 million because they're just estimates at this point. I'm doing what I can. I do plan on coming back in a year to show you how things have gone and what we're spending. But this does not include the administrative costs to manage these funds, do reporting, monitor all the compliance that we're going to basically have a little audit department in here. Hence all my staff sitting here smiling back at you. So we need they look miserable. I know. I turned around and they look miserable. So they're here, we're going to need the staff and the help, so those costs can also be charged to ARPA as well. All right, let's move on to affordable housing. So my recommendation here is Brandy Nauman rolled out the Housing Trust Fund earlier this year. And you can see on the left what the current program is. It was direct buyer assistance, so help with the down payment on a house. That's those types of things. So 80% of AMI, you got $10,000. We then had a development loan fund. So per project, you could apply up to $100,000 or $10,000 per unit. This was a loan, 5-year loan with 0% interest. It had deed restrictions for rentals and outright purchases. The proposed program is to enhance this, to expand its reach. So we have expanding the buyer assistance. Houses have gotten more expensive, so it is harder for those down payments. So have a tiered approach, 100 to 120% AMI, $10,000, 66% 90 to 99% AMI, $20,000, and then the 65% AMI and unders, the $30,000. Again, the 65% AMI and under, completely 100% funded through ARPA. The bigger change here is the development grant fund. It's no longer a loan fund with this recommendation. So this would be $500,000 per project or $50,000 per unit with a cap of $500,000. We would see how the first year goes. We would open up the grant period for $3 million this year. And if it warrants it, we would open up another grant period. It would be a grant, but again, it's still deed restricted. Still, they have to still send us to make sure that we have the 20-year affordability and the 30-year affordability on rentals. So this would go through the same process as the Housing Trust Fund. We'd still accept applications. We still would have the committee. They would still come before you to vote on the final approval. But again, you can see the difference between the current program and what I'm proposing today. Basically, you're going from a loan to a grant, and there's more funds involved.
Could you give us a Reader's Digest version of why we're going to go to a grant versus a loan?
Sure. And it's all about ARPA funds. To do a loan, there's a lot more restrictions and a lot more reporting requirements that are going to live on longer than probably I'm going to be working here. So the grants, ARPA funds, you go and they're gone. It is just much easier to manage. Now, we did hear back from the groups, the affordable housing groups, when we did roll out the loan fund, and they did have their concerns that they couldn't take advantage of it. It's just not going to help them because in 5 years, they're not going to be able to, it's still a loan. They're still going to have to pay it off. And they were just concerned of being able to pay it off in 5 years. So I heard them loud and clear. Again, this is only during the ARPA period. We would do grants, but it would probably go back to a loan, after this. It's just this one time, as we heard from them, that it would obviously help them out better if they had a grant.
What's that bottom bullet mean, the deed restriction 2030, your affordability? I don't understand that, I don't think.
So there will be a restriction on the deed of those properties that have received those funds to make sure that they are considered affordable housing. They are giving those funds for 20 years out. So even though after it's been built, and then for rentals, it's further, it's 30 years.
All right, thanks.
Just a quick question. Do you think we'll need additional staff in that office to help administer this?
She's going to laugh. So I recommended that you might need help, and she says no, she does not. So
You're a trooper, Brandon.
So it was loaded. So so moving on to, again, this is more community development, Brandy Nallman's department, additional low-income services. So increase the rehabilitation allowance from $7,500 to $10,000. So for each house, we are capping our emergency funds at $7,500. We now could go to $10,000. This would not necessarily increase more work on staff because you're still going in with one contract, but with the cost of inflation, it just makes sense at this point. A new roof replacement program. We seem to have more contractors in our pool of contractors that Brandy uses so that we can do a new roof replacement program. The weatherization program. So a lot of times we'll go into these homes, we'll fix their heater, and we're not fixing their windows or their doors necessarily. This would help. We could do that, and then it would also help with the heat to keep things, keep the house more weatherization. So more additional funds to help owners connecting to our water districts. We do have some water districts coming on that are low income, so this would help with their infrastructure of their homes to be able to accept that water. A low income program for delinquent taxes. This would be 65% of AMI or below. And what we found out is with Brandy's list, so she has over 1,000 people on her rehabilitation list. And we're not able to get to some of those 1,000 because they owe taxes. So that with the Clean Hands ordinance, we can't even help them because they don't have money to fix their houses and they don't have money to pay their taxes. So this would, if they're on Brandy's list and they're in the impoverished communities, or they're in the impoverished communities, or in the impoverished communities that have been listed through our HUD settlement, that they would qualify for this new program so that Brandy's group can get to them and help these communities out. And then a low-income program for connection fees. This is something we've heard year after year where Habitat or Milford Housing, they have a low-income group coming on and they can't, almost $7,000 connection fee at this point, they can't afford. Well, we can't grant that. This is a sustainable fund. So these ARPA funds can be used to help with those houses to get to that well-needed infrastructure for the affordable housing. And it also is not just nonprofits, it's also individuals as well.
There's a time limit though, right?
Correct. Once the money has to be spent. So this was going to be absolutely 2024 because there's no contract involved. Yep. All right, EMS, EOC employees. So I'm recommending that we do increase staffing. This is just the one area. 4 additional paramedics, 4 additional dispatchers. We have found during COVID that we're finding that we have minimal staff, so that we should add 1 additional person per shift to get through COVID. So this would be a 2-year commitment since the funds are good till 2024. And then after that, we would still, we would still need the staff. I can't really predict clearly the future, but this is RTT eligible to be used. So this would be something we could sustain. All right, and then the grant program. So we picked some criteria that's within the final rule that applicants can apply. They must respond to the public health emergency, the negative economic impacts related to public health emergency. This would not qualify for affordable housing since we already have an affordable housing program. This would be nonprofits only and be projects of $500,000 or greater. Due to all these requirements in ARPA and all the reporting and compliance, it's not worth small grants to be doing this for anybody to apply. Once you see the website, you'll see everything that they have to do, sign up with the federal government. It's very substantive. So I recommend larger grants to make sure that we can stay compliant. So there will be a portal if you approve on the website. Online application process would be, first round would be April 29th. So say we don't get enough to do the $5 million at that point, I'll still leave it open, and as they come in, present another one to you so that we can just keep moving that money forward. But by giving it a deadline, if we have a lot of applicants, then at that point we can start saying how much we want to give to each applicant. So the money might be spended by April 29th, or it might not. So the grant program, the steps. So just did the council presentation. The application process is ready to go. There will be a committee that would review the applications, make sure that they have the capacity to do the reporting, they do qualify for ARPA. And then I foresee council receiving presentations on those selected applications. And then council, you would end up awarding those funds at that point, and who they go to. And just to be clear, like, this isn't the end of ARPA and we're going off. That all awards that are going through the nonprofit grant program, intergovernmental grant program, the housing affordable development will all still come back to you to be voted on at a future date. I just don't have the details at this point. So at this point, is there any more questions?
Questions of council? Anybody any questions?
Okay, and now we do
You
have.
did a great job, apparently. Oh, your staff helped a lot. didn't you?
Exactly. Please realize it's not just me. And we do have our first grant request for you.
Okay.
If there's no other questions.
I don't see any questions, so you go right ahead.
So the first request is with through Newcastle County and Kent County. It's a statewide substance abuse disorder needs assessment. So what you read a lot in the final rule is that COVID has created a lot of substance abuse, and we're not sure the extent of it. So an assessment would be done, broken down by county, so Sussex would see how COVID's affected Sussex with substance abuse. And we would split the cost. The total cost is $445,097. It had gone out to formal bid. Newcastle County has handled all that. They're asking that Kent and Sussex contribute $75,000 each, so the rest of it would come from Kent, as they are the most populated county. The county is going to be, the project is going to be coordinated completely through Newcastle County, so they'll work through my staff to make sure we get everything that's being reported. You know, once we give them the $75,000 check, we get everything we need for ARPA. There are already 2 town hall meetings on this initiative that are scheduled specifically in Sussex on this initiative, and that's March 15th at Del Tech. So I just want to say they are moving forward, so this is active. So do you have anything?
The only thing I would add is this has been discussed at the Delaware Association of Counties, I think at 2 meetings, when Executive Matt Myers and his team brought it forward. So we're at the point in time now where ARPA money has been distributed and the 3 counties are being asked to join forces to take on this effort.
It seems like a little bit of a narrow focus, though. I mean, on how COVID influenced substance abuse. I mean, it's not going to take a look at the overall, like the big picture of substance abuse, or is that kind of get included in the?
It would be included, but to be qualified for ARPA funds, you have to say how COVID has affected.
Relate it back.
Exactly, but you're going to look at in general how it is and how did COVID affect it in general.
How much data's on that? I mean,
We haven't had it done yet.
Okay.
This is better get it done.
This is just the cost of the assessment.
yeah, okay.
Do we have anything here in Sussex County already in place that's managing this issue?
Not that I'm
No.
aware of.
So there's not something we could already say, well, we've got
No,
data, or we have a.
I don't think the state's done this yet either.
no.
Nobody's done it.
What sort of data would we anticipate coming back from this? Just numbers of people that are using substances and various types, and just a snapshot of what is.
I can read the scope of work that the RFP process used. The needs analysis should include information on demographics, geographic locations, and other factors needed to better understand the current state of substance use disorder prevalence and treatment throughout the state.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the state police doesn't track this. Mental health organizations don't track this already.
Apparently not.
State police is just by arrest, by,
They're not proactively looking at.
What's caused
But
it?
substance abuse health organizations don't track this, monitor this.
It's my understanding that, this started in Newcastle, but it was the state approached Newcastle. There's, they would like something like this done. And it's a big deal. It's come out with ARPA, if you read the final rule, that COVID has made substance abuse worse.
Right.
And now we need to take a lead of some sort to get it done and see how much it's affected our residents.
So would we share this data back with state police, mental health organizations, the state of Delaware, and so forth?
Absolutely. Once it's done, public document.
Does this include the suicide issues that have come along with COVID and substance abuse? Is anything about
If it's
suicide
related to
included?
substance abuse, because specifically substance abuse, but
Seem like that should be also
Part of it.
included in the numbers and. So they're only going to get the data. There's not necessarily a solution, or then each county will have to say what you're going to do with that data, I guess.
correct. And this is, again, something that I would hope we pass on to the people in the county that do this, the state or the organizations, not necessarily. But now the data, we've done the data for Sussex County, we see there's a need.
Then we don't have any say as to, here's the data, here's.
Well, because we don't fund any of that.
Yes, and we don't fund it, so all
Well-
we're going to do is gather.
We're going to gather the information, my understanding, we're going to gather information, all 3 counties are, and hand that off to the state and whoever else that deals with substance abuse and those kind of issues. Because nobody's done this study before. So here's the study, here are the issues in each county, and then pass that on to people that deal with that.
Correct, with recommendations.
With recommendations,
So it would
yeah.
create a report and recommendations to the folks that then see the recommendations and utilize that to decide the next steps. What needs to happen? And when some of the initial discussions, some of the services that these folks need aren't provided in Sussex County at all. So one of the things that we learned and one of the requests by Executive Meyer was join us because your county residents are driving north to get these services, and that's an issue.
Yeah.
So is there already they already know we're getting this information, so it's not like we're going to pay to get this information, there's not the willingness to take this information, is there already a unified, are they going to welcome this information? Are they going to take it and use it?
You would have to, well, you'd have to hope they will. You'd have to ask, why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't they want the information? That kind of would be like, I guess, a negative thing if that's part of what you do is in your job or in your function, and somebody gives you the information and says, here are the problems that have been addressed.
So who's actually asking for the grant?
Newcastle County.
Okay.
Because they want to do a statewide thing,
Who's picking up the difference?
Newcastle County.
So they're actually contributing a lot more than 75 grand?
Correct.
Okay.
A lot, yeah,
Yes.
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's
So I
what-
would hope there's been some background with these agencies or whatever, that they know that this, we're working on this, we're going to spend this money on this, and then hopefully they're going to take it and make it a valuable thing.
Right,
I don't know that we know that.
I guess it's kind of it's a good point. Kind of one thing. Shame on you if you don't. If somebody gives you the information and you don't do anything with it, shame on you for doing
But
that.
if they don't have a lot of it, especially in Sussex County, there's no money to do it. I would think they already know there's a crisis, because we know there's a crisis with substance abuse, yet there's not enough funding to deal with it. So is there going to be funding in this, out of this 45 million, are we going to now follow up with funding for any of that?
No, ma'am.
We're just going to do the data?
Just to do the data to show what I'm thinking is that there's a need in Sussex.
And this quantifies the effect of COVID and also the lack of services, and those recommendations will show a path forward. And just like anytime we get recommendations, you all make a decision. Do we do step 1, 2, 3, 4? Where do we stop? How much money is available to fulfill those recommendations? I think this is the first step to assess it, and then the decision makers will have to decide what they do with the assessment and the recommendations that come with it.
Sure. Yeah.
So do you need a motion on this?
Any more questions?
Do you have it? I have it. You have it.
You have a motion, ma'am?
Sure. Be it moved that the Sussex County Council approves a grant of $75,000 from its ARPA funding to Newcastle County for the purposes of supporting a statewide substance use disorder needs assessment.
Pleasure, council.
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Schaefer.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hudson. Any questions on the motion? We'll take the vote. Mr. Schaefer.
Yes.
Mrs. Green.
I would prefer to see the 75,000 directly spent for the problem, but hopefully this will initiate positive and give us some more details. Reluctantly, I will vote yes.
Mr. Riley.
I vote yes.
Mr. Hudson.
I vote yes.
I'll be the motion carried. Thank you, ma'am. Next.
Thank you. Okay,
You're still up.
I'm still up.